So my views on doing cardio have been controversial, to say the least. Many of the times when I present the idea that you may not actually need additional, what most people refer to as cardio or steady state cardio for heart health or fat loss, it tends to ruffle a lot of feathers. It tends to make people literally angry when I make this viewpoint when it comes to cardio. And I'm going to explain why my views on cardio are what they are. I'm not simply pulling these recommendations out of thin air. When I come to a recommendation based on exercise, there are a variety of factors I consider before coming to that recommendation. Okay, first of all, I consider the literature. What does the literature have to show for a particular exercise or fitness recommendation? Number two, the physiology that we're actually considering when it comes to doing a particular exercise modality and the outcome physiologically that we're looking for. Number three, I also look at what I've seen in my clients. At this point, I've trained several hundred clients, both in person, in my private studios, and remotely. And I measure the results. I measure everything from body composition to resting heart rate to strength, you name it. And the fourth thing I consider is simply logic, critical thinking. And combining all these four things together, I come up with what makes sense to be a logical recommendation for whatever exercise modality. This is kind of how I came to the conclusion that high intensity training seems to make the most sense considering all these things. Now, does this mean other modalities don't work? No. Muscle is a very responsive tissue. If you place a stress or demand on your muscle using anything, there's going to be acute and in many cases chronic physiological adaptations. Okay? But what I'm interested in is the safest and the most time efficient approach, because people have busy lives. People have things going on. Not everybody is an exercise enthusiast. Not everybody is a 22-year-old gym rat with not much going on and can afford to spend 2 hours a day in the gym. The problem is, when life starts to happen, fitness tends to get pushed to the side. Which is why I'm most interested in recommendations that people can adhere to forever and see all of the visual and health benefits that exercise has to offer. And this is where I come to the conclusion that cardio, or traditional steady state, locomotive, long duration, low intensity activity, is not worth your time if you are strength training correctly or strength training in a particular way. All right, I want to preface this recommendation by considering the way most people strength train. Okay, the way most people strength train is of very low intensity, short set duration, long rest periods in between exercises. Okay, if an individual is training like this, the way most people strength train, with principles that are pretty much handed down from somebody they know who strength train, or principles that are just observed in your average gym, if you're training like this, you're probably going to need additional cardio, because that approach to strength training does not place a very high demand on the cardiovascular system or stimulates the chronic adaptations that we're looking for in terms of cardiovascular fitness and cardiovascular health. But if you are training a particular way, more specifically, a high intensity training approach, like that is taught in my Golden Era System, goldenerasystem.com, then it appears if we consider these four factors, literature, physiology, what I have observed in my clients, in my own practice, and logic, doesn't seem to show that additional steady state cardio provides any benefit at all. okay? So let's start from the top. What does the literature say? Well, there's a paper I like to refer to quite often, and I've got it pulled up right here on the computer. This paper was published in the Journal of Exercise Physiology in 2012. The title, and I'll put a link to the paper in the description, even though I've done this a million times at this point. Resistance training to momentary muscular failure improves cardiovascular fitness in humans. A review of acute physiological responses and chronic physiological adaptations. This paper was written by exercise scientists. Dr. James Steele, Dr. James Fisher, Dr. Doug McGuff, Stuart Bruslow, and Dave Smith, all PhDs, and in fact, Dr. Doug McGuff is an MD. He's a medical doctor. Okay, and what this paper found was there are some chronic physiological adaptations that occur as a result of exercise that improve cardiovascular health and cardiovascular fitness. Okay, and I'm going to read them off for you here. So part 6, chronic adaptations to resistance training. It says a plethora of research demonstrates the positive physiological adaptations that may mediate observed improvement in cardiovascular fitness as a result of resistance training. It is also clear that these adaptations are, for the most part, a result of resistance training at high intensity, i.e. performing sets to failure. Adaptations including upregulation in mitochondrial enzymes, mitochondrial proliferation, or the addition of more mitochondria, the organelle involved in aerobic metabolism that more or less consumes the byproduct pyruvate of glycolysis and turns it into more energy, and conversion towards type 2A phenotype in terms of the muscle fibers may be the physiological adaptations underlying observed improvement in cardiovascular fitness variables. There is little evidence to support the contention that the myocardium is directly stimulated, meaning that the heart itself is directly stimulated and the direct result of your improvement in cardiovascular health. Now, let's explore this a little further. A lot of people think that when you undergo a zone 2 or relatively low intensity heart rate over a long duration, the heart is what gets stronger and the heart is what improves. So a lot of people are under the impression you need to do the steady state stuff for what they refer to as heart health. But as that sentence states, most of the adaptations are not really taking place in the heart. They're taking place on the periphery, away from the heart, mostly in the muscle tissue. So there's little evidence to support that a lot of these adaptations are stimulated in the heart, and that any subsequent adaptations are promoted within it as a response to intense resistance training. And so it seems unlikely that this is a mechanism involved in improving cardiovascular fitness as a result of resistance training. However, vascular adaptations, including capillarization, have been shown to occur within the peripheral musculature as a response to resistance training to failure. They are likely to contribute to the improvement in cardiovascular fitness through enhanced local muscle oxygen supply. Figure 2 presents a schematic depiction of the chronic adaptations produced by resistance training performed to failure. It would appear that such adaptations are not dependent upon the particular exercise modality, as similar adaptations have been evidenced through other forms of intense training, and comparative studies of differing modalities do not clearly favor one form over another. We suggest the key factor in determining physiological adaptations to promote cardiovascular fitness is intense muscular contraction. So I'll put this up on the screen so you can see the schematic of the adaptations that occur. And in layman terms, what they're finding is the improvement in the cardiovascular system, which appears to mostly happen on the periphery or outside of the actual heart itself, is stimulated by nothing more than intense muscular contraction. Now, will steady state cardiovascular activity provide, over a long enough duration, a muscular contraction that is intense enough to stimulate these physiological adaptations? Yes. But what they found was the resistance training itself does the trick. And that additional steady state locomotive stuff like jogging, swimming, walking, whatever, doesn't provide any additional benefit if you are training with enough intensity to stimulate these adaptations. So when I read this paper, I couldn't believe it. At first, I used to do cardio. I used to, do the stair mill or the treadmill a couple times a week because I was under the impression you needed additional cardio. Then I read this paper, probably about 10 years ago, and I stopped doing cardio altogether because it just made sense. My resting heart rate is still in the high 40s, low 50s. I got my blood pressure checked last week. It was 122/78, which is perfect. And it seems, and also cholesterol levels have remained low forever with no additional cardio. And I'm saying I haven't done a minute of traditional cardio in the last 10 years. I haven't gained excessive fat tissue either. So after reading this paper, I took it for what it's worth, and I've been applying what this paper had to show over the last 10 years and applying it to my clients as well. So that other component, what have I observed in my clients? Both in studio, training people in person and training people remotely, all of the resting heart rates went down, which is a sign of an improvement in cardiovascular health and fitness. Blood pressure went down. An overall reduction in fatigability went down. Almost all my clients would notice they would do activities that used to make them tired, and they no longer made them tired. One particular client I was speaking to a couple weeks ago went on vacation in Croatia, and they were doing all kinds of hiking. Now, I'd been training this individual for about 6 to 8 weeks at this point, no cardio. He said everybody he was with was huffing and puffing and exhausted from the hiking, and he said he felt like he could do it all day. Okay? Just one example, I've got plenty of them. So I'm observing this in my clients as well. Now, the physiological aspect of this. Well, it's clear that you simply need to place a heavy demand on the muscle tissue itself to place a demand on the systems which support that muscle. Cardiovascular system, your metabolic system. Now, I often say your body doesn't know the difference. It doesn't. An intense muscle contraction is an intense muscle contraction. Whether you're getting this intense muscle contraction from running or a leg press, your body doesn't know the difference. Now, some people might say that there is a difference between aerobic exercise and anaerobic exercise. Now, let's get into the physiology of that for a second. First of all, you cannot perform aerobic exercise without first performing anaerobic exercise. The way cellular metabolism works is that the mitochondria essentially consume the byproduct of glycolysis, which is pyruvate. Pyruvate gets converted into something called acetyl-CoA that the mitochondria uses throughout the Krebs cycle or the citric acid cycle, whichever you want to call it, and produces a plethora of ATP, over 30 ATP. Now, glycolysis itself can produce ATP very rapidly, the anaerobic system, but it's limited to how much energy it can produce. Eventually, the anaerobic system works so fast and so quickly, it builds up more pyruvate than the mitochondria itself can consume and produce energy out of. That pyruvate gets acted on something called lactate dehydrogenase, gets turned into lactic acid, and funneled through the body for later use. This is where you get that lactic acid burn. So when you're doing an intense resistance training set and you're getting to the point where it's very uncomfortable, your muscles are burning and you're pushing as hard as you can, well, you're actually having that stack up from anaerobic metabolism, and the aerobic metabolism is running so fast that it simply cannot even accept any more pyruvate, and that's why you're getting that lactic acid burn. So if you're trained to the point where the exercise is burning and uncomfortable, it's a clear indication that you are stimulating aerobic metabolism as much as possible because it's burning, because it literally can't accept any more pyruvate because it's running full throttle. Okay, so if you're training resistance training intensely enough, you're stimulating both aerobic metabolism and anaerobic. Now, it is true that you can use anaerobic subsegment of metabolism by itself, but this is extremely short bouts of high intensity exercise, mostly probably what most people are doing in the gym. But if you do a set like I teach in the Golden Era system, and you take a set of slightly longer duration and higher intensity, you're going to be working both these subsegments of metabolism together, both stimulating anaerobic and aerobic pathways. Okay, so that's the physiology behind it. And now let's wrap it up with logic. Okay, so if we tie what the literature says to the physiology and combine that with what I'm literally measuring and observing in my own clients, logically, it doesn't seem to make sense that if you train with high intensity of effort and don't take huge breaks in between sets and just train, how the Golden Era system teaches you, additional cardio makes no additional sense. Okay? It doesn't seem to provide any additional benefit. Now, does this mean you have to exclude it altogether? No. Will additional cardio interfere with your recovery ability, like what a lot of high intensity training advocates believe? Absolutely not. It's not going to be intense enough or stressful enough to interfere with the recovery process to a certain degree. Obviously, if you're jogging 10 miles a day, that's probably going to interfere. So when it comes to cardio, these are my thoughts. If you train in a high intensity training way, the way I advocate, the way I teach, the way I've been teaching for over a decade, additional steady state cardio, not necessary. Not for heart health, not for body composition, not for overall cardiovascular fitness. But if you're training the way people traditionally train, the average Planet Fitness gym goer, you probably should be doing additional cardio, and you're going to need it. Now, if you'd like to save time, get the cardiovascular benefit and muscular strength and size and all the benefits associated with exercise, you should be doing a high intensity training protocol. It's going to save you time not only in the gym, but it's going to save you time that you don't have to allocate hours and hours of steady state activity per week. And if you want a system that shows you how to do this, go to goldenerasystem.com. If you want my direct help learning how to apply these principles and transform your body very quickly with very little time spent in the gym, I'm talking about 5 to 10 pounds of muscle tissue in the first 4 weeks while reducing fat. There's another link in the description. Join my coaching program. So before you get all bent out of shape about cardio, the message is simple. If you like it, do it. If you hate it, do high intensity training and you won't need it. Okay? Don't forget to hit the like, subscribe, and the bell notification icon so you can be notified when I drop more evidence-based approaches and recommendations so you can get the best physique and the best health possible with as little time spent in the gym. See you next time.